Okay, so everyone has been muted, and if you need to speak later, just remember to *6 to unmute yourself. This is DePelch Magruder. Thank you so much for joining this Saturday's call. Since it is the back-to-school period, we're focusing primarily on advice for back to school, and we'll get into that in a little while. But first, we want to kick it off with an inspirational quote by Vanessa. Vanessa, don't forget to *6 to unmute yourself.
Sorry, guys, I'm still a little bit rusty. Good morning. Our inspirational quote this week is from Barack Obama. I thought this was fitting for a number of reasons, but because we are diving into education. And the quote is, every single one of you has something good, something you're good at. Every single one of you has something to offer. And you have a responsibility to yourself to discover what that is. That's an opportunity education can provide.
Thank you. And so very true. So next I will give a quick overview of our purpose and mission and updates on a couple of our current initiatives before turning it over to our presenter. So our mission and purpose, we have two organizations. Moms of Black Boys United is our 501c3, and its purpose is to provide information and support for moms of Black sons while promoting positive images of Black boys and men. Mob United for Social Change is our 501c4 advocacy organization, and its goal is to influence policy that impacts how Black boys and men are treated by law enforcement and in society. So next page, we have a 5-point approach on how we do that. Number 1 is to influence policy. Number 2, to change the perception of Black males. Number 3, to demonstrate our power politically and economically, and it's especially important right now in this election season to make sure we're demonstrating our political power. Number 4 is to partner strategically with like-minded organizations and individuals who are working toward the same goals or similar goals in terms of justice for all people. And number 5 is to promote self-care and make sure that we're taking care of ourselves as we're on this journey, which is a long-term journey. So that is our mission and approach. The next page, I just want to talk about the big thing that's happening this upcoming week, which is that we will be in Washington, D.C. at the Congressional Black Caucus Legislative Conference. And this is our 3rd year attending the conference, but we're participating in a much bigger way this year. So the first year we went, it was right after Mob United started, and we just went and sat in the audience and listened and learned about the policies that were underway and asked questions in forums. Last year we did the same, but we also hosted a short film screening with films centered around our theme and our mission, and also hosted a panel discussion afterwards that included Congressman Hank Johnson from Georgia and several people across law enforcement, community engagement, restorative justice, etc., who were based in Washington, D.C., and that was a great event. But this year, we are actually going to be a part of the main conference on the main stage. Kicking off the conference is something called the National Town Hall. It's like the official kickoff for the conference, and somehow I was chosen to be one of the panelists for that conference, which is very humbling and a very big deal, especially when you consider some of the other people on the panel, and I'm just trying to pull it up. But I know there are opening remarks by CBC Chairman Cedric Richmond, Senators Cory Booker and Kamala Harris, Representative Sheila Jackson Lee, the president of the foundation, Shawnice Washington, and then there'll be remarks by Bishop Michael Curry, who performed the royal wedding. Then there'll be a one-on-one conversation moderated by Joy Reid from MSNBC with Sabrina Fulton, Trayvon Martin's mother. And then the panel discussion will begin. Joy Reid will also moderate the panel discussion, and it includes Stacey Abrams, who's the Democratic candidate for governor in Georgia, also Mayor LaToya Cantrell of New Orleans, Simone Sanders, who we see a lot on CNN as a commentator and strategist, Representative Bonnie Coleman, who is a congresswoman. I'm not sure what state she's from, but she's in the House of Representatives. also someone from Procter & Gamble who recently came on as a sponsor, and me. So it will be an interesting conversation on fighting for equality and really Black women's leadership in this critical time. So if you will be in D.C. or can get to D.C., please join us. We'll be there September 12th through the 16th. That opening panel is Thursday morning at 9:30 a.m. I should also add the day before, on September 12th, we're hosting a Noble seminar at Gallaudet University, which is an all-deaf university. And as you know, we've been hosting seminars in partnership with Noble, which is the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, throughout the summer. Most of them were held in June, I believe. But this one at Gallaudet is happening this Wednesday, September 12th. And it should be really interesting. There's been a lot of excitement on campus about it because the deaf population is definitely a population that needs to hear more about how to engage in police interactions. There could be a lot of miscommunications given that they can't hear the police's commands, and police may not know that they can't hear. So there have been a number of incidents with deaf people being hurt or killed by police, and so that should be a very interesting conversation. So if you're in D.C., you're welcome to join us there as well from 4 to 6 p.m. on Wednesday. So the next page, the thing I want to share is our partnership to promote the upcoming film, The Hate You Give. The film is based on a book written by Angie Thomas. It's her first novel, but a very well done book, and the plot is essentially a Black boy gets killed by police, and, unarmed Black boy, and the whole story unfolds from there. And the protagonist is a young girl who was there with him when it happened, and her journey, and, the community's journey and her family's journey in navigating the situation and trying to get justice for him. So it's very much aligned with our mission, and the PR firm who's handling promotion for the film actually reached out to us to be a promotional partner. So we're officially hosting a pre-screening before the film comes out in New York on October 11th in partnership with the Schomburg Center for Research and also an organization called Ground Control Parenting that focuses on giving parents advice on how to raise their children, and boys in particular. And also, my mom is yelling at me. But also, we're also looking to host screenings in different cities where we have chapters. So we're just waiting to hear back on whether those will be pre-release or after the film comes out. But we encourage everyone to go see this film. And if you would like to host a screening in your city, please let us know, and we can try to make that happen. So I think that's it. Kamari, do you want to jump in to talk about the book club related to this as well? Kamari, and don't forget to star 6.
Thank you for saying that, because I was going.
Okay.
Right, so,
I figured.
So The Hate You Give is the book that we're reading for the book club to support the movie. We started reading it last Monday. We had our first post on last Monday, and we'll have another post on this Monday. And hopefully that you'll engage in the conversations about the book. The book is extremely good, and it has a lot of verbiage in it that we know that we try not to use, but it's a really good book. So please engage in conversations on the feed. You can always look for hashtag Mob United Book Club if you want to find any of the other books that we used in the past. And we'll be doing the next post on Monday. Thanks so much.
Great, thank you. And that's, of course, in our Facebook group. So just look for hashtag Mob United Book Club. Is that what you said, Kamari?
Yes, Mob United Book Club.
Okay, great. Okay, and that is all I have to share for now. With that, I want to turn it over to Vanessa, who will introduce our speaker, who you actually just heard from.
Hey, guys, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Great. Excited to introduce, again, Coach Kamari, who is such a wonderful resource to Mob United. She is a parenting coach who recently joined me on a panel out here in Los Angeles that we titled Changing the Narrative, the School to Prosperity Pipeline. Kamari is an expert in in serving parents and educators and professionals in schools, nonprofits, and churches, where she facilitates workshops and trainings on topics from engaging parents, raising successful children, to disciplining strategies and communicating with children. So she also shares a lot of her expertise with our moms on the various ways that they can navigate the educational system in hopes to advocate for their son. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Kamari. Kamari, thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. What we're trying to do this year, like we did last year, is just give you guys some tips for a successful school year. I know that school's pretty much started for everyone now. I do believe, like I've heard from moms saying that a few districts have started this week. So we're just trying to give you some tips to ensure that you have a successful school year with your children. I do hope that you guys will engage and also ask questions during the conversation, just so I can make sure that I get everybody's questions answered. So some of the tips that I'm going to give you this year are based on some of the things from my book, 10 Parenting Strategies to Raise Confident, Successful Children, as well as the workshops that I do in schools across New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York. So first, I want to just make sure that I tell you guys that you have to talk to your children about their goals for this academic year, in and out of school, because a lot of times what happens is that some parents go to back to school night and then they don't come back to school again. And I know that for sure because I'm one of those persons who are always in school because I do so many workshops. And we have to make sure that we stay involved. So we have to make sure we talk with our kids about their goals. If that means having a spreadsheet of the goals, having a task list of the goals in the house, having a vision board of the goals in the house, it's always good. When kids can see what they're trying to accomplish and they can visualize it, it's a lot easier for them to accomplish as well because so many of our kids are visual learners. So if you have like a big board in your house, or you have a piece of poster board that you want to put on the wall, and you can have the goals that they have for themselves, the goals you have for yourself as well for the school year, so that everyone can meet their goals. I tell parents a lot of times to have like they can write up a little parent promise. When I do my workshop motivating students for better results and motivating our children for better results for the school year, I always tell parents to write a parent promise to themselves. So that would entail asking your children, what can I do for you to help you be successful this year? And when you ask your child that, they can tell you, well, you know, because some kids feel as though their parents yell a lot, and some kids feel as though their parents aren't always supportive of them in school. I get a lot of kids that will tell me that they have parents that don't show up to a lot of the events at school. So if the child tells you that, hey, could you come to more of the events? Could you possibly not yell so much? Those are things that you can have in your parent promise. And I always tell parents that you can keep your parent promise in your closet, you can put it on your wall, you can keep it in your wallet, whatever the case may be, but it's kind of like a reminder to you of what you're promising to your child. So have your child write those goals down, have a checkoff list, hang it on their wall, make it a conversation that the family can talk about, because if it's a family experience and everyone is talking about it, it can become a reality. So I talk to a lot of parents that have multiple children, and sometimes it's hard, especially if your children are different age groups, just to make sure that they're communicating as well as you're communicating with them. Sometimes I'll have conversations with parents that will tell me that they have one child that really is a concern for them. That child tends to get in trouble. That child tends to have a lot of concerns in school. So sometimes they feel as though they're neglecting the other child. And it happens. And I know that as parents, we're always trying to multitask. I know as women, we're always trying to multitask. So it's always about trying to make sure that all your children are getting attention. And I know that's hard sometimes, but we do have to make sure that if you have a child who is doing really, really well, it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't need your attention. I've had kids tell me that they're doing really, really well in school because their brother is always doing this, and that, and they're just trying to stay out of trouble. And that's not good either. We don't want our kids to feel like they have to be perfect because of a sibling. So we want to make sure we have conversations around that in the family. Also, for younger and school-age children, have them have positive affirmations around the house. I have positive affirmations everywhere in my house. My son has his own bathroom. He has his affirmations on his mirror. So when he was younger, and I would tell him that he needs to say those affirmations out loud, because I know sometimes we have negative chatter in our heads, and that negative chatter sometimes is very negative. So because of that, and I know as adults we have the same thing, It's about making sure that you're always having those positive affirmations in front of you to tell you that you're beautiful, that you're smart, that you have talents, that you can do anything you want to do. But having those kids write out those I am statements and putting them on their mirror is very helpful to them to see it in front of them as well as believe it themselves. You can change skies. Does anybody have any questions so far? I don't know if anybody needs to star 6. So talking to your children about any concerns or challenges that they're worried about in school is very helpful. Of course, we have the back-to-school nights that a lot of parents are going to right now. I've already been to 2 myself because I work in school districts, so I go to a lot of the back-to-school nights because the principal introduces me to the parents to let them know that I'm going to be in the school doing workshops. So because of that, we want to make sure that we are talking to our children about their challenges, about any issues that they had in class already. Like my son came home last week telling me that he's in this class called Math Development, and the teacher was talking very negative to the students and was kind of like very nasty. And I even said to him, look, your mom's a little bit abrasive, so I'm not necessarily going to pull you out the class for that. But I did mention it to the principal, like maybe she needs some support because it was the first day of class, and I get you need to lay down the law in middle school, but at the same time, you don't have to be nasty to students because she was literally talking down to one of the kids. So it's about us making sure that we're advocating for our kids as well as listening to their concerns and what they're going through, because a lot of times the teachers are right, sometimes they're wrong, but sometimes our kids have done things too that they need to make sure that they're being mindful of. So just make sure that you're always talking about the challenges and concerns is very important. Also, offering your child encouragement words. Encouraging words are always needed. So letting them know that they shouldn't doubt themselves, letting them know they shouldn't worry, let them know if they didn't do well on this math test, they'll do well on the next math test. Always encouraging them and showing up to school events so they know that they have your support. I can't stress that enough because I know a lot of parents, when the kids start to get older, they sometimes pull back because they're trying to give them more space. And it's not that our kids don't need the space, but at the same time, they do need to make sure that we are still there for them. I talk to a lot of parents that have high school students, and they're like, well, they don't want me at the school. And I'm like, and I get that. They definitely shouldn't have us sitting, in the building all day. But at the same time, them knowing that we're around makes a difference. The teachers knowing that we're around makes a difference. I talk to parents all the time that aren't involved at all in the school, and then something happens with their kid, and then they're there because something happened to the kid. And I've heard teachers say, well, I only hear from the parent when the kid's in trouble, or the parent only reaches out to me when something happens. I don't talk to the parent often. But I also tell teachers when I do trainings with teachers and staff that they have to make sure they're reaching out to the parent other than when the child's in trouble, because I know that happens a lot, and a lot of parents tend to fall back when they feel like they're only getting calls when the child is in trouble. So I definitely always have workshops and trainings on making sure that we're partners as a teacher and parent, because that's important for our kid to see that. It's important for our kid to see that we work together with their teacher, and if their teacher is an issue, making sure that that is getting addressed. So also writing down your goals for the upcoming year. Like I mentioned before, the parent promise, your list of promises you're going to have for your child, having it on the fridge, in your closet, in the bathroom, whatever place it is where you want to remind yourself of what you're going to promise your child for the school year. You can go to the next slide. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. So, like I mentioned before, back to school nights are important. I know sometimes parents get really busy. I know a lot of us have multiple jobs. But just making sure that we're not only showing up for the events that our child is in is sometimes hurtful to the child too. Sometimes parents will only show up when the kid's in a play or when the kid is in a show. And I've even known sometimes when parents don't even go get the kid's report card. I've seen that before. So we have to make sure that we're staying engaged so our kid knows that we're involved. Talking to their teachers, if they have multiple teachers, talking to each of them. I do want to know, and I want to see if you guys are engaged with your child's teacher. How many of you actually reach out to your child's teacher often? Maybe not every day, but maybe once a week or once a month. How many of you guys do that? I'm just curious. Anybody? Okay.
I reach out at once every 2 months or 6 weeks just to try and see if, she's on track.
Right. Yeah, when they're older, I know we definitely fall back a little, because I know even when Ethan was in elementary school, I was reaching out to teachers sometimes once a week, depending on what the class was and if he was struggling in that class. But at the same time, we have to make sure that our kids also know that we're connecting with that teacher. So that is definitely something that's understandable. 6 weeks. Sometimes I know some parents that do it every other month. Some parents that do it every 2 weeks. It just depends on the child, depends on the teacher as well, depends on the school. There's some schools that are a little more open than others. There's some schools that are not necessarily make you feel welcomed. I was on a committee a couple years ago in our school district because the principals were wondering how come the parents don't come to a lot of the events. And when we did this poll, because I was on this poll for equity in the district, one of the things that we found out, and I knew they were going to find out, was that sometimes the administrative staff was not friendly. And I knew that was true in my son's school. When you would walk into the office, she'd actually make you feel like you were on her nerves. She literally said to me one day, "I have a lot going on right now." I'm like, "Okay, that's great, but I'm here to bring us lunch." You know what I mean? So it's unfortunate when the administrative staff isn't friendly, and I know that happens in some schools too. Our school district happens to be not very diverse, so there's very few minority staff in the building. So sometimes a lot of minority staff, or minority parents would tell me that they don't necessarily feel welcome in the school. They don't feel welcome by the secretary, administrative staff. Sometimes they don't feel welcome by the principal. Sometimes they don't feel welcome by the teachers. So that's definitely something that we have to address if we don't feel that. Do any of you guys go to Board of Education meetings in your child's school districts?
I just have a question.
Of course.
My son is going to high school. He's going to be a freshman. And so they have said the preferred method of communication is email, and they will be emailing us, and they have very consistently. And they also use PowerSchool to give you an update. You can choose if you want weekly, biweekly, monthly, on what your child is doing in their class. I'm kind of having withdrawal symptoms because I'm used to being highly involved, but they also want to encourage the students to be an advocate for themselves and more proactive.
Right.
So I'd love to hear, what balance, if there is anyone on the phone that has someone who's in high school already.
Yeah. What happens a lot of times in high school, they do want the kids to be more independent. Even the fact, the other day, when Ethan came to me about this teacher who was abrasive in the classroom, and I even said to him, "Well, babe, your mom's a little abrasive too. I know sometimes I can come off kind of like curt." I said, "So maybe perhaps that was what her demeanor was, because she was trying to tell you guys what her expectations were, which is what she was talking about, her expectations of them." So. And I totally get that in middle school and high school, they are trying to get them to be more independent, which is very, very important for the kids to do. But at the same time, there are events that parents can be involved in. So, because I have had a high school, and my son is now 25, our oldest, and he's finished college now. And I know for sure that in middle and high school, he didn't want me in the school all the time. But see, I'm also that kind of parent that just shows up. So even if I wasn't there all the time, I was still involved in PTO, PTA. I was still involved in the school activities. And I'm not going to lie to you, every now and then he would look up in math class at the door, and I was standing there. So I think that there has to be a balance in terms of knowing your kid, knowing the school, knowing the atmosphere. I get that a lot of schools want the parents to fall back a little bit so that the kids are more independent. But I would say still be involved in the activities that they do allow the parents to be involved in. So the PTO, PTA, if they have that in the school, if they have Board of Education meetings, if you have concerns, go to those, because those are things that you can definitely be involved in, and your child is not being affected by them, at least not directly. I would definitely say to still connect with your child's teacher. If you know there's a class that he's struggling in, maybe that's the teacher that you connect with more, to find out if there's anything that you can do at home, to find out if he's missing any assignments, if he's doing everything he needs to do, if there's anything he can do differently. So I would say that also talk with your child about that too. For example, even just this week, Ethan said to me, because he started 6th grade, that he struggled in math in elementary school. And I noticed that he did his homework the other day, and I was like, okay, Ethan, half your answers are wrong. So do you want me to connect with your teacher? And he asked me, no, Mom, I will connect with him. I will tell him that I need help. Please don't ask him yet. So we have an agreement. Okay, so if your first test comes back lower than an 85, 88, then I'm allowed to connect with your teacher and find out what we can do to help you. So it's about making sure you're having that communication with your child as well to see how much they want you to be involved. Because I know for sure that I was totally involved in elementary school, and I would just show up all the time. And now Ethan wants to be more independent, and I'm trying to respect that. So I would say just find that balance and talk with your child about that as well. Does that make sense?
Oh, sure. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? So, okay, you can go to the next slide. Thank you, Vanessa. So also talking with our children about what's going on in school is very important. So having conversations with them about themselves, standing up for themselves, being who they are, being their own person, being a leader, not being a follower, recognizing that their choices matter. I have a mantra in my house: every choice you make has a consequence or a reward. So I literally can start that sentence and my children can finish it, because a lot of times our kids are dealing with other dramas in school. I know for sure when we were younger, we dealt with bullies. We had kids who were mean and nasty, but now it's to a whole other level because of the internet, because of cyberspace. Kids will have more access to each other. So kids are not only getting nasty messages at school or nasty messages at home, but while they're on their way to school, they're getting text messages. When they're on the bus, they're getting text messages. When they're in school, they're getting text messages. So it's been happening more and more because, unfortunately, our kids have access to each other way more than we ever had access to each other. So it's happening more, and it's happening in a more negative way, and it's affecting our kids. So a lot of parents need to end up having conversations with their teachers, having conversations with principals about what's going on in the school. There are some schools that have a no bullying policy, period, like no bullying happens at all. And I've heard parents tell me that the principal is on it. But then you have some schools where the principal is not as strict on bullying as they could be. So there's a lot of bullying in the school. So we have to talk to our kids about standing up for themselves, talk to kids about not being a bully, because a lot of times you have no idea how many bullying workshops I do, and I have a parent in the room whose child is the bully, and they're completely acting like their child's a victim. So it's about making sure that we're having conversations with the kids about not being mean to people, not being a person who is antagonizing others, and being a friendly person. So that has a lot to do with character. And it has a lot to do with kids understanding what integrity is and understanding what being a good person is and understanding that they have to do the right thing when nobody is looking. Because so many of us as parents are talking to our kids about things, but when they're dealing with things in school, we don't always know what's going on. So we have to ask questions, not just how was your day, asking them how was your day and what did you do and how was that math test you took and how was that English test you took? Is that teacher still seem like she doesn't feel like being bothered? You know, just asking more and more questions, because as they get older, they do start to shut down because they're going through their own stuff. I tell parents all the time, I remember when my oldest was like 9 and he started to get really mouthy. And one of my friends said to me, she was like, girl, it's going to get worse. And I'm going to tell you right now, at one point in time, you're not even going to know him. And I kid you not, she was not lying. By the time he was 12, I literally could have sold him on eBay. It was ridiculous. So he was terrible. Attitude was through the roof. So it was like from 12 to like 16 and a half, 17. I was like, who is this kid? But the reality was, you know, us having the relationship that we have with our kids, because I had a great relationship with him before that, and while he was going through this, I was still like, Kamar, I'm here for you. I'm here for you, trying to talk to him, trying to have conversations with him. When he did turn 18, thank goodness, he came back to the child that I love. But we know as parents we're going to go through things because our kids are going through tribulations. They're going through all kinds of trials. They're going through their own stuff. We have to recognize that the stuff that they're going through is important to them. So even if we went through it when we were younger, oh, I was fine, I got through it, I'm good, we have to recognize that our kids are going through it, and we can't just make it seem like it's not important, because there are kids who do crazy things because they're going through something and their parents don't hear them. There are kids who do crazy things because they're going through something and their parent just ignores it, and they act like it's not going on, or they don't address it, and then it gets worse and worse. And kids find coping strategies, and sometimes their coping strategies are not good. Sometimes they're not positive coping strategies. I've seen kids who started using drugs. I've seen kids who started drinking. I've seen kids who started hanging out with the bad crowd because they felt like their parents were not paying attention to them. So we want to make sure that we're always having conversations all the time, every day. So if your child is quiet in their room and doesn't feel like being bothered, you say, hey, come out of your room for a few minutes when you feel, in a little bit, and let's chat a little bit to find out about your day. I know sometimes we don't feel like being bothered either. And as parents, we work a lot. But we still have to make sure that we're connecting every day with our kids, because it makes a difference to them as well as to us in our relationship with them. So also connecting with the school when situations arise immediately. So I talk to parents a lot about this when something happens at the school. You're getting a call from the school saying that your child has done something, and you have to go there because something happened, but you knew something happened like 2 weeks ago and you didn't address it. So I would say when things happen, connect immediately with the school. So, for example, my Ethan had gotten into a situation with this little boy who was bothering him, and I connected with the school immediately, and it ended up escalating where the kid ended up pushing him. And by that time, the principal had already known. But I know that ended up getting a situation where the kid was pushed Ethan, and Ethan pushed the kid back. But the kid lied and said Ethan pushed him first. But because I had already talked to the principal knew that this kid had been bothering him. So that also can avoid situations where it looks like your kid is the bully. So if you know your kid is involved in something, or somebody's bothering your kid, you want to mention it in advance. Because let's be real, people do hit limits, and if the child keeps bothering your kid and your kid snaps, you want to make sure that someone knew from the beginning that somebody was bothering your kid, because you don't want to make it seem like, okay, well, this kid just snapped, and you know how they do with our black boys. This kid just snapped, and he just started going around and just saying this and saying this to people. Yeah, but if the kid was pushed to that limit, you can't be mad at him. So when Ethan finally did snap, the principal literally said to me, I get it, Kamari, and I understand that he got there because this kid kept bothering him. And he literally said those words to me. So we want to make sure that we deal with situations immediately as soon as they happen, even if it just means touching base with the teacher and letting them know, hey, just want to let you know about a situation that happened in school. This situation happened with this child. Just want to put you on alert. That's all it needs to be. It doesn't need to be anything other than that, just so the teacher's on alert in case anything happens worse. Does that make sense? Anybody have any questions? Did anybody ever have a situation that happened with their child where it escalated in school, or a situation where their child was in trouble with a bully or otherwise?
I'd like to share something on the topic that you were talking about in terms of talking with your child on a regular basis. I thought that I was doing a really good job at that. I talk to my daughter every day, and I know it's a little different, but and I thought I was doing a really good job at it, but I found out recently that she went through a really tough spell in middle school, around towards the end of the 7th grade, something that I didn't know of now. Now she's a freshman in high school. And I unfortunately found out about it through the repercussions of her, dealing with the situation in a negative way. My daughter was harming herself, and I had no idea. And I beat myself up for it. That was the immediate reaction, because, I feel like I'm there for everyone else. Why was I not able to be there for her? That was the thing that hit me first. And then secondary to that, it was like, how did I miss this along the way? Yeah. So now I promise to myself is to, continue to be there for her, but more than before.
Yes. So, and is your daughter the type of child that goes inward when they're sad or upset?
Yes, and I am consistently trying to drag it out of her.
Yeah.
I'm consistently trying to, spend time with her and, really ask her to talk to me. But one of the things that you said that really hit home was the fact that sometimes they kind of, are maybe a recluse and kind of stick to their room. She's very much like that. She's always in her room, and I'm always trying to drag her out of there to spend time and to talk with me. But sometimes, I get caught up in my own world too, and 2 or 3 hours will go by and I realize she's been in her room the whole time.
Yeah. And don't beat yourself up. I mean, we are all doing the best that we can, and you are a great mom. And what happens a lot of times with our kids is that sometimes they do feed from our energy as well. They do. Sometimes they feel as though, they're busy, so I won't bother them. You know what I mean? So I totally understand the guilt because I've felt that guilt myself. But again, we still do the best that we can. And in reaching out to her and making sure that she knows you're there is important for the future if she ever feels like that again. And do not beat yourself up at all, because we all go through things that we're like, oh my gosh, I totally missed that. My kid was sending sending messages to some girl naked. I totally missed that. And me and this kid had a great relationship. So, I mean, there's things that as parents we do miss, and we're like, how the heck did I miss that? How the heck did that happen? I'm right into my nose, but it's like at the same time, we're still human. We're still human. And us going to our kids and saying, you know what, I'm so sorry that I missed that. I'm so sorry that I wasn't there when you needed me. I'm so sorry. Like, those words is something that our kids can hear, and they can absorb those words, and it also makes them feel better, because our kids love us and they just want us to be the best as well. But you're right. Sometimes we do get caught up in our lives, our jobs, things that we have to do, other children we're taking care of, so it does happen. But I do want to reiterate, if you do have a child that goes to their room and doesn't come out a lot, you do want to make sure that you're going in there and finding out what's going on, because those are the kids that can turn to that. Those are the kids that can start making choices that are not so good, because, again, they're learning how to cope on their own. So we do have to make sure we're doing that. So I'm so grateful that she has you and going in there and asking her to come out of her room and spend time with you, and going out with you when you go out, or spending time with her, just girl time, whatever the case may be. I'm so happy that you're doing it, because she's very blessed to have a mom like you. She really is. You have no idea how many parents I talk to where their kids start struggling and they miss it, and then they find out that they missed it, and they still keep going and not giving that kid what they need. So the fact that you're going and taking the time to go out of your way to make sure that you're giving her what she needs is the best thing that you can do. And I'm so sorry that you went through that, and I'm so sorry she went through that as well. Anybody else have any questions? Anybody have any questions? Okay, you can go to the next slide. All right, so also having a conversation with your child about the behaviors is a good thing. Unfortunately, sometimes our kids learn their behaviors from us, that's for sure. You have no idea how many parents I'll talk to, and they'll tell me their kid have a bad attitude, or their kid has anger issues, or their kid is disrespectful, and then I'm talking to them and I'm asking them, well, what kind of conversations do you have? And then they'll tell me that you yell a lot, or they don't have a good relationship with the kid. And sometimes that comes from our own behaviors. I've had so many parents that yell all the time at their kids and then wonder why their kids' behaviors are the way they are. So we want to make sure that we're watching our own behaviors as well as helping our children have better behaviors. So there's a workshop that I do called Social Emotional Intelligence, and a lot of that has to do with helping our children understand their emotions, their feelings, how to deal with them, how to process them, how to handle them. But what's so crazy about that workshop when I do it with parents is that I realize that so many parents tell me that they have issues with their own emotions, because sometimes we didn't learn how to deal with things. Sometimes we realize that, I have an anger problem. I handle anger very poorly. I handle my emotions very poorly. So our kids do learn from our behaviors. So we want to make sure that we are having conversations with our children about their behaviors, but also watching our own. Make sure that we're watching what we say, what we do. Make sure that they're paying attention to us all the time. I mean, I'm quite sure I'm not the only one that knows that their child is watching them all the time, watching how you handle people who call you, watch how you handle people in your life, watch how you handle stress, watch how you handle when you're angry, when something goes wrong. They absorb everything. So we want to make sure that we're talking to them about their behaviors as well as watching our own. So I know I mentioned before about being an active parent. But I also want to make sure that I reiterate that sometimes our children do have behaviors and do things that aren't so great. So we do have to make sure as parents that we're seeing our kid for who they are. You have no idea how many parents will tell me that the school's calling me about this and calling me about that and calling me about this and calling me about that. But at the same time, the parent is completely ignoring the fact that their child is a bit out of control. Their child is disruptive. Their child is doing things they shouldn't be doing. So making sure that we see our kid for who they are is important, but also supporting them and advocating for them is important as well. So even if you know your child can be a bit off the hook, making sure that you're connecting with the teacher and saying, how can I help? How can I make this better? Talking with your child about their behaviors, because sometimes as parents, people will cover their eyes. Not my kid, not my kid, not my kid. And the teacher looks at them like, yeah, your kid. Or a friend's parents like, yeah, your kid did this to my kid. So sometimes as parents, we don't always see our kids for who they are. Sometimes we do kind of close our eyes and turn our heads when they do things they shouldn't do. And that comes from a lot of different reasons as well. Sometimes it comes from us just being embarrassed. Sometimes it just comes from us feeling some kind of way or taking on all of those emotions of guilt. I knew a mom whose child should have been diagnosed when she was in the 3rd grade and was not diagnosed until she was in the 8th. Something she should have been diagnosed probably when she was 4. So it's about us recognizing that sometimes our kids struggle, and as parents, we have to recognize when they struggle, and we want to make sure that we're helping them when they struggle and being honest with ourselves about it. We don't want to be one of those parents that says, not my child, because that's not fair to our kid. It's not fair to ourselves. And we want to make sure that we're giving our children as much as they possibly can have to be the most successful person that they can be. And in doing that, we have to make sure that we're always giving them truth, the real talk, and having conversations with them about their behaviors. So don't deny or take offense to their behaviors. Intervene early. And it just goes back to the fact that sometimes as parents we do take offense. I've worked with a lot of parents whose relationships have fallen apart because they have a child who has a learning disability. That's actually very common for relationships not to work between parents. Sometimes it has to do with a parent who doesn't want to deal with the fact that their child has an issue or concern or a learning disability, or that a child is disabled. There's sometimes when parents' ego gets in the way of recognizing that, yes, I have to help my child. I just have to do the best that I can for them. I literally have done parent coaching with parents who have a child who is, this one couple I was working with, they literally fell apart when they realized that their son was autistic. And the father was not dealing. Like, he was to the point where he was in denial. He's fine. There's nothing wrong with him. His attitude was like, this is your fault, your side of the family. And he literally walked away from his family. And they had 4 kids. And the mom was left to deal with it by herself. And it was so unfortunate because he just didn't want to accept that this happened to them and didn't want to go in and do the work to make sure that his child was still successful. They ended up divorcing and they ended up, just having conversations about the child and having conversations about their other children. But the father was really not in his life for a very long time. And then at some point in time, they did start to talk again, but it was many, many years later. So it's not uncommon for families who have children who have learning disabilities or disabilities or concerns for the parents to have discord. It's not uncommon for families to have discord when there's a child who has a disability in the home. But at the same time, we have to recognize that as parents, we still have a responsibility to be there for that child and to help them and be whoever they're going to be in the world. So unfortunately, some parents do deny that deny approach, where they just deny, which is what that mom did, whose child should have been diagnosed when they were probably very early in age, opposed to 8th grade or 7th or 8th grade. But at the same time, if it does happen where the child is diagnosed late, we do have to make sure that we're still helping that child be successful. Any questions on that? Is anybody dealing with anything in school with their child's learning disability or concerns? Because I know I get a lot of questions in this district because actually I met with a guy the other day, this dad whose child is autistic in this district, because certain schools in our school district in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, certain schools have very great resources that other schools don't. So the schools that are not Title I schools, and that's Title I is just basically parental involvement, but Title I schools get more funding. So those schools get more resources as well. And this father moved to a side of the district where his son is in a school where the kids in the school, it's very low with children with disabilities, learning disabilities, as well as other concerns. So him being in the school, his child's not getting the resources that he needs. And we literally had a conversation about the fact that you can either continue to push for him to get those resources there, or you can move him to another school where they have the resources. It's up to you. That's what I told him. But at the same time, you just want to make sure that your son's getting what he needs, because he felt as though the teachers were lowering the work for him, and the work was really easy just so his son would pass, so he wouldn't be a bother to them. And he was really annoyed with the fact that they were just giving him, like, busy work opposed to really teaching him. So, all right, you can go to the next slide. So start having conversations with your children really early about college. I know that, I work with first-generation college students all the time, and I also work with parents who have not gone to college, who have children who are going off to college. And one of the things that I've found is that when we don't know, sometimes we don't necessarily know what to say, but we have to make sure that we're reaching out and asking people for resources and having conversations with others that may know the information that we don't. So a lot of times what happens is that when parents are not persons who have gone to school, they don't necessarily know all of the ins and outs of it. So they don't necessarily get all involved as they could to find out what their child needs to do to go to college. But starting conversations about college is extremely important very early. I want to say that again. Starting conversations about college is important, but the earlier the better. So, for example, right now I'm the director of racial and ethnic justice of Lehigh Valley, and one of the things that we're doing is we're having conversations with 4th and 5th graders about college, because a lot of times parents are not having those conversations because they don't know. And if they've never gone to school, they don't necessarily know what all the processes are. So just having conversations with your kids about it, having conversations with the parents about it, making sure that they're aware that they have that option, because I find that so many kids don't feel as though they have the option to go to school because they don't think their parents have money, or they feel as though their grades aren't good. But I always tell my story of how my GPA was terrible in high school, and it was probably worse in college. And even when I was in college and my GPA went from a 3.4 to a 0.7 in like a semester and a half, because I was working full-time and part-time and raising my son. And I literally was told, you will never get into grad school. You want to go to Columbia? Are you crazy? You couldn't go there. They're not going to accept you. They only accept students that have really great GPAs. My GPA was terrible. And I applied to Columbia anyway with a 2.5 GPA, and I got in. But the one difference was I could write. And I tell parents and students all the time, if you can write, if you can express yourself on paper, you can do anything. Because one of the biggest things that colleges look for, they do not look for the perfect student. They do not look for the perfect family. They're not looking for the student who did everything and got straight A's the entire time and was never involved in anything. Colleges want well-rounded students. More and more colleges want students of color on their campuses because they don't have a lot of students of color. So it's always good to make sure that your child knows that they can get into any school they want to if they try. And I wrote my application and my letter of acceptance at least 25 times when I was applying to Columbia. And when I finally went into this big room, this board room of people with this semicircle of professionals looking all really serious, and I had to sit in a chair in the middle of them and express my application and why I was coming there and why I wanted to attend that school and what everything was about and why my grades were so low at one point in time and why I had failed this one class 5 times. And I had to explain myself and explain my everything that was on my personal statement. The woman looked at me and she was just like, you know what, Kamari, we had already decided to accept you. We just wanted to know who wrote this personal statement because it was phenomenal. And she was like, congratulations and welcome to Columbia University. And I graduated from that school with a 3.85. I had to prove to myself I wasn't a dummy. That was something I had to prove to myself. But I knew for sure that going to school, going to college, going to grad school is not unattainable. But that's something that I always felt. I never felt that I could do those things. I never really felt I was very smart. And our kids have to recognize that they can do anything they want to do. So like if they were a kid like me, has very low self-esteem, we have to constantly build on our kids, constantly build on them. So tell them about college early, talk with them about all the possibilities, everything they possibly could do for themselves. Anything they want to do, they could achieve it. Always having those conversations with them. And start visiting colleges. It may not have to be the big ones. Like my oldest son, I think he must have applied to 14 schools, and some of them were completely across the country. And I told him anyway, you know what, we'll do virtual tours for the ones in California if we can't go visit, and the ones that are close enough we can go drive to them. But we drove around the different schools and I showed them to him. And I love the schools he wanted to go to. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we talk to our kids about school, because some people just think they can go to community college. Some kids think that that's all they can achieve. But we have to let them know community college is great. There's nothing wrong with community college at all. But if you want to go to a four-year institution, you should go. And we shouldn't discourage them from that, because I've known some four-year institutions in some other states that are way cheaper than our community college in our own towns. And I know that for sure in our town. There's some schools that are out of state that are much cheaper than our in-town community college. So you want to make sure that you're looking at your pros and cons and making sure that, of course, you're looking at your budget, but you have to make sure you're talking with your kid about scholarships. So, for example, starting financial aid early, if you have a child that's a senior, their financial aid should be done by October 1st, October 15th. I literally had a conversation with my neighbor like 2 weeks ago and said to her, hey, are you guys going to be doing a financial aid soon? Because she has a senior. And she said to me, oh, yeah, I did financial aid for my last daughter in May. And I was like, and how much money did she get? She said, hardly any. And I said, because you applied in May. I said, one of the things we have to make sure we do is apply as early as possible, because that money goes quick. If you can apply between the 1st and the 15th of October and at least get your paperwork in and get that SAR back, that student aid report, saying that, okay, at least an application is in, and then they'll start asking you for your tax papers and all that other stuff once the year starts. But if your SAR is done and your financial aid packet is at least completed up to that point, even if your taxes aren't done until February, March, at least your financial aid packet is in, and your child will still get the money. So the earlier you apply, the more money you'll get. And there's also that gentleman that's on the right there in that picture. He actually went to Drexel. He graduated the same year my son did at Drexel. And he started this company called Scholly, which is a scholarship. It's a scholarship website where kids can go on and get scholarships for college, grad school, as well as doctoral programs. And he went on the Shark Tank, and he received, I think, $1 million or $2 million from Lori Grenier and Damon John. So now he's moved his company to California. One of my son's best friends used to work for him, and he moved to California with him when he moved to California. And this is a really great scholarship program that our kids can find money. I do believe the website is myscholly.com. You can go to the next slide. Anybody have any questions? Well, thank you, ladies. Let me know if you have any other questions. You can always message me on Facebook. You can email me at coachkamari at gmail.com, or on the MOB website. You can email me at mobconnections@mobunited.org. And or you can text me at 201-341-1782. I'm always asking parents questions. I'm always talking to parents, so I do not have a problem texting a parent back at midnight. I literally have parents that text me all the time. I do parent coaching, so I have some of my clients that will call me at 2 o'clock in the morning when they're arguing. So it's fine. Just let me know what you need. I'm always here for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kamari. That was wonderful advice. Does anyone have any other questions? Okay, I may sign up for a private session.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the number again for texting? I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, of course. It's 201-341-1782. 1782.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, I was going to say I may call you for a private session if I have a few questions that I could discuss offline. Yeah. I want to go into all of
We're
it
so grateful to have such a wonderful resource. And sometimes we have great resources and don't even realize how fantastic they are. Really, really appreciate you.
I appreciate you guys, too.
Yes, and I don't think, since the last call, we didn't talk about the panel discussion that you participated in L.A. Do you all want to give a quick update on that?
Vanessa did a phenomenal job.
No, Kamari did a phenomenal job. The whole purpose of the panel was to try and show that we can really steer our kids in a different direction. And the whole school to pipeline rhetoric is something that we know is very true, and something that we are trying to change to create the school to prosperity pipeline. And Kamari shared some wonderful advice to the attendees, who are both a mixture of parents, some educators, and some media representatives, about how our children are being affected by implicit bias and microaggressions in the school system, and how we can, and how those implicit biases and microaggressions affect our students from the early childhood all the way through secondary education and even into post-secondary education. And the thought was that we need to be doing, or the learning institutions need to be doing a better job of training the educators, so that they are realizing where these implicit biases are coming in and correcting them before they get to our students and affect our students. That was the long and short of it. But the other part that Kamari brought to the table that was extremely important was just, the whole conversation about speaking to our children, finding out what's happening in their schools, and advocating for them when there is an issue that arises, because sometimes these implicit biases and microaggressions are playing out and we are not even aware of them. Right, Kamari?
Definitely. Our kids are dealing with so much stuff all the time, especially when they're in districts where there's not a lot of other minority children. I'm actually excited about 6th grade for Ethan, because he's finally not the only black boy in his class. You have no idea how excited I am. And I'm so happy for him, because he came home like, Mom, there's 2 black boys in my class. Like, he was excited. So it's like just the little things that happen in the classroom that, like, even how I was telling you, Vanessa, the other last week about that woman who was just saying all kinds of nasty, crazy stuff to my kid every day, making him feel bad about himself, and he was failing math for like 4 months in a row, every test from September to December. And then one day it finally slips when he calls her mommy, and she's like, I'm not your mother, I'm not that dark. And then, okay, now we know what the problem has been all this time. Like, now we know why you were talking to him sideways and saying to him, you need to pay attention. You know you're not good at math. Like, she would just say, like, the most craziest stuff to him, like, to make him feel crappy about himself, and then wondering why he's not performing for her. Like, kids cannot learn from people they don't like. So, our teachers have to make sure that they're also recognizing that they have a job to do. You're there to teach, whether the child's black, white, Puerto Rican, or what. So it's so unfortunate that so many people have issues and they bring it to the table, and then children feel it in the classroom. It's terrible. So, yeah. Right. But they feel the microaggressions. They feel it big time.
And I also think we haven't updated. Since the last call, we also had the Trayvon Martin screening in L.A., and we've been doing the weekly live updates, so maybe we should share that as well.
Yep, sure. So we are actually coming towards the tail end of the Trayvon Martin, what we've called it, Rest in Power talkbacks. It happened kind of sporadically, just based on the fact that there were so many moms that were affected by watching the documentary, and we saw it just, pouring out into the timeline on Facebook. We, the leadership of MOB and a lot of the members knew that the documentary was coming out. We've actually also participated in screening partnerships with Paramount Network and BET Network to screen, and Google Network to screen the Trayvon Martin documentary here in Los Angeles. So we kind of picked up where we left off on after the screening and after the first episode aired, and we saw all of the responses on Facebook. We decided to just address it. It was something that was spontaneous, but it turned out to be something that we have a good amount of moms tuning in for. And basically, it's like a watch and talk, if you will. So we've watched the episode on the day it airs, and then we head back to Facebook to talk about it via Facebook Live with me, yours truly, leading the conversation. But the next one, I believe, will be coming up next Monday. Sometimes the network preempts the show, and we don't find out until that day. But please check the events section if you're interested in joining in the conversation.
Thank you. Anything else from anyone before we wrap up? Do you want to share or ask? Okay. Well, if not, I just want to close out with actually two quotes by Shirley Chisholm, who is the first woman to run for president. And going into CBC, this seems like an appropriate thing to share. She said, "Of course, laws will not eliminate prejudice from the hearts of human beings, but that is no reason to allow prejudice to continue to be enshrined in our laws, to perpetuate injustice through inaction." And the other quote from her is, "You don't make progress by standing on the sidelines, whimpering and complaining. You make progress by implementing ideas." So that's what we are trying to do in Mob United. Of course, you're welcome to also whimper and complain here because it's a safe space and a support group, but ultimately we're going to take our complaining and turn it into action. That's what we've been doing. So thank you, ladies, for joining. Please join us in D.C. if you can. If not, I'm sure we'll go live from there to give an update in the Facebook group. But have a great weekend.
Thank you.
And thank you, Kamari.
Have a great weekend, ladies.
Have a great weekend.
Bye-bye.